The front door hung open like a broken promise, and I knew immediately that my life had just taken a hard left turn into crazy town. I stood there on my own porch, briefcase in hand, staring at the shattered glass scattered across our welcome mat like confetti from hell. The October wind whipped through our maple trees, sending leaves skittering past my feet and into our violated home. "Janet?" I called out, stepping carefully over the glass. My work boots crunched on the fragments as I pushed the door wider. The living room looked like a tornado had thrown a tantrum. Our 65-inch Samsung lay face down on the hardwood floor, its screen spider-webbed beyond repair. The coffee table was overturned, magazines and remotes scattered everywhere. Our wedding photo, the one where Janet looked genuinely happy, hung askew on the wall, its frame cracked. But here's the thing that made my engineer brain start clicking. Nothing looked right about this mess. Too staged, too perfect. Like someone had watched a movie about break-ins and taken notes. "Oh my God, David!" Janet's voice came from the kitchen, high and trembling. "Thank God you're home." I found her sitting at our kitchen island, mascara streaked down her cheeks in perfectly symmetrical lines. She wore her best victim expression, the one she'd perfected during our 8 years of marriage whenever she wanted something expensive. "Honey, what happened?" I set down my briefcase and moved toward her, playing the concerned husband role I'd mastered. "It was Sam," she sobbed, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "He came by around 6, completely wasted. Started yelling about money, about how you owe him from that poker game last month. When I told him you weren't home, he just snapped." I felt my eyebrows climb toward my hairline. Sam Morrison, my best friend since college, the guy who'd been best man at our wedding, who helped me install our deck last summer. Sam, who hadn't had a drink in 3 years after his DUI scare. "Sam did this?" I gestured toward the living room carnage. "He threw the TV down, David, right in front of me. Said if you wouldn't pay up, he'd take it out in property damage. Then he grabbed some cash from my purse and left." She dissolved into fresh tears, her shoulders shaking with what I had to admit was an impressive performance. I walked back into the living room, studying the scene with the methodical eye that had made me a decent mechanical engineer. The TV hadn't been thrown. The impact pattern was all wrong. It had been carefully lowered and then struck with something heavy, probably the fireplace poker, which I noticed was lying conveniently nearby, slightly out of place. "Did you call the police?" I asked, returning to the kitchen. Janet's crying hitched for just a second. I was too scared. I just locked myself in the bedroom until I heard your car." "Well, we need to call them now." I pulled out my phone. "This is breaking and entering, destruction of property. Sam's going to have to answer for this." "David, wait." Her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. "Maybe we should think about this. I mean, Sam's your oldest friend. Maybe he was just having a bad day. You know how he gets when he's been drinking." There it was. The tell. Janet had been pushing me to cut ties with Sam for months, claiming he was a bad influence, that he didn't fit with our social circle. Sam, who worked construction and drove a 15-year-old pickup truck, who told jokes that made Janet wrinkle her nose in distaste. "No, honey, friends don't trash each other's homes." I dialed 911, watching her face carefully. "Yes, I'd like to report a break-in and vandalism. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." While I gave the dispatcher our information, Janet excused herself to freshen up before the police arrived. I heard her in the bathroom, probably perfecting her victim makeup. Meanwhile, I did what any good engineer would do. I gathered data. Our smart home system had been my pet project last year. Cameras, sensors, the works. Janet had complained about the expense, but I'd insisted on the security features. Now, I pulled up the app on my phone, scrolling through the day's recordings. The footage from our front door camera showed Sam arriving at 3:47 p.m., not 6 o'clock. He'd knocked, waited, knocked again, then left after maybe 2 minutes. He looked sober, walked straight to his truck, drove away normally. At 5:23 p.m., the interior cameras caught something much more interesting. Janet, still in her work clothes, systematically destroying our living room. She'd used a baseball bat on the TV, then arranged the fireplace poker nearby. She'd overturned the coffee table with careful precision, making sure nothing truly valuable got damaged. Her jewelry box remained untouched on the mantel. Her laptop sat safely on the kitchen counter. But the real prize was the audio pickup from our bedroom. At 4:15 p.m., Janet on the phone with someone named Brad. "No, it has to look convincing," she'd said, her voice nothing like the terrified victim act she was pulling now. "Sam's the perfect fall guy. David will never suspect his precious best friend would do something like this. Once Sam's out of the picture, you and I can move forward without any complications." Brad. I'd heard that name before. Janet's new client at the PR firm where she worked, the one she'd been taking a lot of evening meetings with lately. The police arrived 20 minutes later, Officer Martinez and Detective Carol Brennan, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd seen every scam in the book. "Mrs. Patterson, can you walk me through what happened?" Detective Brennan had her notebook out, pen poised. Janet launched into her performance, complete with fresh tears and dramatic gestures. She painted Sam as an unstable alcoholic with a grudge, a dangerous man who'd threatened her and destroyed our home in a drunken rage. I let her finish, then cleared my throat. "Detective, before we go any further, there's something you should see." Janet's eyes went wide as I pulled out my phone. "David, what are you doing?" "Just sharing some additional evidence, honey." I connected my phone to our smart TV in the kitchen, the one that hadn't been vandalized, and pulled up the security footage. The room went silent as we watched Janet methodically destroy our living room, talking on the phone, checking her watch like she was following a schedule. Detective Brennan looked from the screen to Janet, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am, do you have an explanation for this?" Janet's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not... David, this has to be fake. Someone hacked our system. This is impossible." "The timestamp matches our internet provider's logs," I said calmly. "And here's the audio from earlier today." Brad's voice filled the kitchen, tinny but clear through the TV speakers. "Are you sure this will work? What if David doesn't buy it?" "Trust me," Janet's recorded voice replied. "David's too trusting. He'll never suspect me. And once Sam's arrested, he'll be so grateful for my support through this trauma that he won't question anything else." Officer Martinez was already reaching for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for filing a false police report and destruction of property." But Detective Brennan held up a hand. "Hold on, Martinez. Mrs. Patterson, who is Brad?" Janet had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I want a lawyer." "That's your right," Detective Brennan said. "But right now, I'm more interested in this conspiracy to frame an innocent man. David, do you have any idea who this Brad person might be?" I pretended to think about it, though I'd already done my homework. "There's a Brad Castellano who works at Meridian Financial. Janet's mentioned him as a new client. Drives a white Tesla, works out at that expensive gym downtown." "Brad Castellano," Detective Brennan wrote it down. "We'll want to have a conversation with Mr. Castellano as well." As they led Janet away in handcuffs, she turned back to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure hatred mixed with disbelief. The mask had finally slipped completely. "You planned this," she hissed. "You knew somehow. This isn't over, David." I watched the police car pull away, then called Sam. "Dave, thank God," he answered on the first ring. "I just heard from Mrs. Haskell next door that the cops were at your place. Everything okay?" Everything's fine now, buddy. Janet tried to frame you for trashing our house. Silence. Then, she what? Long story. Want to grab a beer? I think I'm going to need several. I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. As I waited for Sam, I walked through our house, seeing it clearly for the first time in months. The expensive decorations Janet had insisted on, the furniture that looked good but felt cold, the photos where her smile never quite reached her eyes. 8 years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. A stranger who'd been planning to destroy my oldest friendship and probably steal half of everything I'd worked for. But Janet had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the quiet guy with the engineering degree and the attention to detail. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Sam picked me up in his battered Ford pickup, country music playing low on the radio. We drove to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar on the outskirts of town where the beer was cheap and the questions were few. So let me get this straight, Sam said after I'd filled him in on the evening's events. Janet destroyed your living room, called the cops, and tried to pin it on me so she could clear the way for her affair with some finance guy named Brad? That's the size of it. I took a long pull from my beer. The question is, what else has she been planning? Sam shook his head. His weathered face creased with disbelief. Dave, I gotta ask, how long do you think this has been going on? I've been thinking about that. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos. Look at this. I showed him a picture from our anniversary dinner last month. Janet was smiling at the camera, but her phone was face down on the table, and she kept glancing at it throughout the meal. She's been different for months, working late, taking calls in the other room, spending money on clothes and makeup like she's trying to impress someone new. You think she's planning to leave you? I think she's planning to take me for everything I'm worth first. I signaled the bartender for another round. The question is, how deep does this go? Who else is involved? As if summoned by my paranoia, my phone buzzed with a text from Chelsea Morrison, no relation to Sam despite the shared last name. Chelsea was Janet's best friend and partner in crime for every shopping spree and girls' night out for the past 3 years. David, I just heard about Janet's arrest. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding. Janet would never do what they're saying. You need to bail her out immediately and get her a good lawyer. Call me. I showed the text to Sam, who snorted. Chelsea's been poisoned since day one. Remember when she tried to convince Janet that you were cheating because you worked late on the Henderson project? Yeah. And Janet believed her until I showed her the client emails proving I was actually at the office. I typed back a response. Thanks for your concern, Chelsea. The security footage speaks for itself. Janet made her choices. The reply came back within seconds. You're making a huge mistake. Janet has friends who won't stand for this kind of treatment. Fix this before it gets worse. Is she threatening you? Sam leaned over to read the message. Sounds like it. I screenshot the conversation and saved it to my cloud drive. I'm starting to think Janet's amateur hour compared to her support network. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. David, this is Brad Castellano. I think we need to talk. I put the phone on speaker so Sam could hear. I bet we do, Brad. What's on your mind? Look, this whole thing has gotten out of hand. Janet's emotional, she makes bad decisions when she's upset. But filing false charges against her? That's vindictive, man. She's sitting in jail right now because of you. She's sitting in jail because she committed multiple felonies, Brad. I just provided the evidence. Evidence that could have been fabricated. Everyone knows you're some kind of tech wizard. You could have doctored those recordings. I felt my temper starting to rise, but kept my voice level. Is that the story you two are going with? That I framed my own wife? I'm saying maybe we can work something out. Janet drops the divorce papers she filed this afternoon. She filed for divorce? I interrupted. A pause. You didn't know? Her lawyer submitted the paperwork at 4 p.m. She's asking for half of everything, plus spousal support, plus she's claiming emotional abuse. Sam was making throat-cutting gestures, telling me to hang up, but I needed to hear this. Emotional abuse? She has documentation, David. Photos of bruises, recorded conversations where you're verbally abusive, testimony from friends about your controlling behavior. All fabricated. Maybe, maybe not. Point is, she's got a case and a good lawyer. But if you drop the criminal charges, maybe she'd be willing to settle for less in the divorce. I looked at Sam, who was shaking his head in amazement. Brad, let me ask you something. How long have you and Janet been planning this? I don't know what you mean. The affair, the frame job with Sam, the divorce papers, the abuse allegations, this is all coordinated. You've been working together for months. You're paranoid, man. Janet's just a friend who's been going through a rough patch in her marriage. A friend you've been sleeping with. Another pause. I think this conversation is over. I think you're right. But Brad? Next time you want to destroy someone's life, make sure they're not recording the conversation. I hung up and looked at Sam. Well, this just got interesting. Dude, they're trying to take you for everything. The house, your savings, probably half your pension. Not if I can help it. I pulled up my contacts and found the number for Mike Chen, a lawyer I'd worked with on some patent applications. Mike. It's David Patterson. I need a divorce attorney, and I need one tonight. While I arranged to meet with Mike's partner, who specialized in family law, Sam was doing his own research on his phone. Dave, you need to see this. He showed me Brad Castellano's LinkedIn profile. This guy's not just some finance bro. He's a partner at Meridian Financial, makes serious money. I studied the profile photo. Brad in an expensive suit, perfect teeth, the kind of guy who probably had his hair professionally styled twice a week. What's a guy like that want with Janet? Maybe it's not about Janet specifically, Sam said slowly. Maybe it's about what she can bring to the table. Think about it. Your patents are worth what, $500,000? Your house is paid off, you've got savings, retirement accounts. To a guy like Brad, Janet's not a girlfriend, she's a business opportunity. That made an uncomfortable amount of sense. Janet worked in PR. She knew how to manipulate narratives, create believable stories. Brad had the money to fund a good legal team and the connections to make problems disappear. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a Facebook message from Derek Hoffman, a guy I barely knew who worked out at the same gym as Brad. Hey David, heard about your wife's arrest. Just wanted you to know that Brad's been telling people at the gym that you're abusive and unstable. Says Janet's been coming to him for support because she's afraid of you. Thought you should know what story they're spreading. I showed the message to Sam. They're getting ahead of the narrative. What do you mean? Public opinion. If this goes to trial, they want potential jurors to already believe I'm the bad guy. They're poisoning the well. Sam finished his beer and stood up. So what's the plan? I looked around Murphy's Tavern, at the construction workers and mechanics and truck drivers who made up the regular crowd, hard-working people who didn't have patience for entitled rich guys who thought they could buy their way out of consequences. The plan is, we fight back. But we're going to be smart about it, and we're going to use their own tactics against them. Meaning? Meaning Janet and Brad want to play games with reputation and public opinion? Fine. Let's see how they like it when the game gets turned around on them. I pulled up the recording of Janet's phone conversation with Brad and started typing out a Facebook post. What are you doing? Sam asked. Going nuclear. By morning, my Facebook post had been shared 47 times and generated over 200 comments. I'd kept it simple. When your wife tries to frame your best friend for a crime she committed herself, and you have the security footage to prove it. Attached was a carefully edited version of Janet's performance, destroying our living room while talking to Brad about framing Sam. The comments ranged from supportive to outraged to disbelieving, but the overall tone was clear. People were not impressed with Janet's behavior. My phone had been buzzing all night with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I'd let them go to voicemail, and now I was listening to the messages over coffee. David, this is Amanda Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the domestic incident involving your wife. Mr. Patterson, this is Jake Morrison from the Herald Tribune. We're running a story about false police reports, and we'd love to get your perspective. David, it's your mother. I saw the news online. Call me immediately. That last one I'd have to deal with eventually, but not yet. My lawyer, Patricia Vance, had agreed to meet me at 7 a.m. at her office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in messy divorces, and Mike Chen had assured me she was the best in the state. David, I've reviewed the materials you sent over last night, she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her desk. This is either the most elaborate frame job I've ever seen, or your wife is remarkably stupid. I'm leaning toward the second option. The good news is that the criminal charges against her are solid: filing a false police report, destruction of property, conspiracy. She's looking at real jail time if convicted. And the divorce? Patricia's expression grew more serious. That's where things get complicated. She's alleging emotional and psychological abuse, and she's got what appears to be substantial documentation. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photos of Janet with bruises on her arms and face, printouts of text messages where I allegedly threatened her, and sworn statements from Chelsea and 2 other friends detailing my controlling and abusive behavior. This is all fake, I said, flipping through the documents. I've never laid a hand on Janet, and these text messages. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my actual message history with Janet. These aren't from my phone. I believe you, but proving it in court is going to be another matter. They've been thorough. I studied the photos more carefully. The bruising looked real, but something was off about the lighting and angles. Patricia, can you recommend a good forensic photo analyst? You think the pictures are doctored? I think Janet's been planning this for a long time, and she's had help. I told her about Brad, about the coordinated timing of the frame job and the divorce filing, about the story they were spreading around town. Patricia took notes as I talked, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. David, what you're describing is a sophisticated conspiracy to defraud you of your assets and destroy your reputation. If you're right, we're not just talking about divorce court. We're talking about criminal conspiracy charges. So, what do? We investigate, and we document everything. Every phone call, every text message, every conversation. If they want to play dirty, we'll beat them at their own game. I left Patricia's office feeling more optimistic than I had since this whole mess started. But my mood darkened when I got to my car and found Derek Hoffman waiting for me. Derek was a big guy, gym-muscled and aggressive, wearing a tight t-shirt that showed off his arms. He was leaning against my Honda Civic with his arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. You David Patterson? Depends who's asking. I'm asking. You need to take down that video, man. Janet's a good person, and you're destroying her reputation with lies. I unlocked my car and opened the door. The video speaks for itself, Derek. If you don't like what it shows, maybe your friend Janet shouldn't have committed felonies. Derek pushed off from my car and stepped closer. Brad says you're unstable, says Janet's been afraid of you for months. Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about respecting women. I looked at Derek, 6'2", probably 220, used to intimidating people with his size. Then I looked at the security camera mounted on the corner of Patricia's building, the busy street with plenty of witnesses, the professional district where assault charges would be taken very seriously. Derek, let me give you some free advice. Your buddy Brad is using you. He's got Janet convinced that she can take half of everything I own, and he's got you convinced that playing enforcer makes you some kind of hero. But when this all comes crashing down, and it will, Brad's going to disappear and leave you holding the bag. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that Brad makes more money in a month than you see all year. I know that guys like him don't have real friends, they have useful idiots. And I know that right now you're being very useful. Derek's face was getting red, his hands clenching into fists. You think you're so smart, I think I'm smart enough not to assault someone in broad daylight on a public street while being recorded by multiple security cameras. I pointed to the camera above us, then to the dash cam visible in a parked car across the street. But hey, if you want to catch a felony assault charge to impress Brad, that's your choice. Derek looked around, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. His shoulders sagged slightly. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You're right, it's not. But Derek, next time Brad sends you to do his dirty work, ask yourself what he's risking versus what you're risking, because I guarantee you it's not the same thing." I got in my car and drove away, leaving Derek standing on the sidewalk. In my rearview mirror, I saw him pull out his phone, probably calling Brad to report that intimidation hadn't worked. My own phone rang as I was driving home. "Sam. Dave, you need to get down to Murphy's right now." "What's wrong?" "Chelsea's here with two of her friends, telling everyone who will listen that you beat Janet and framed her for the break-in. They're showing around photos of her all bruised up, saying you're dangerous." I checked my watch. 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Chelsea was at a dive bar running a smear campaign. These people were committed. I had to give them that. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Dave, bring copies of that security footage. These people need to see the truth." I made a quick stop at home to print out some materials, then headed to Murphy's. The parking lot was more crowded than usual for a Tuesday morning. Word was spreading, and people were choosing sides. Inside, I found Chelsea holding court at a corner table, surrounded by a mix of Janet's friends and curious locals. She was passing around her phone, showing the photos of Janet's bruises, her voice carrying across the bar. "He's been abusing her for years," Chelsea was saying. "Janet was too scared to leave because he threatened to ruin her if she tried. When she finally worked up the courage to document his violence, he turned it around and framed her for a crime she didn't commit." I walked over to the bar and ordered a beer, listening to the murmurs of sympathy from Chelsea's audience. Then I pulled out my phone and connected it to the bar's sound system. Murphy had installed it for karaoke nights, but it worked just as well for public presentations. "Excuse me, everyone," I called out, my voice amplified through the speakers. "I'd like to share some additional information about yesterday's events." The bar went quiet. Chelsea looked up, her face going pale when she saw me. "David, you shouldn't be here," she said. "After what you did to Janet." "What I did was provide evidence of a crime to the police." I pulled up the security footage on my phone. This is what actually happened yesterday afternoon. The bar's TV screens lit up with the video of Janet systematically destroying our living room. The audio was crystal clear. Her conversation with Brad about framing Sam, her cold calculation as she arranged the scene. When it finished, the bar was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. "Now," I said, "let's talk about those photos Chelsea's been showing around." I pulled up the forensic analysis Patricia had arranged on an emergency basis. These pictures were taken with a professional camera, not a phone. The metadata shows they were shot in a photography studio downtown, not in our home. The bruises were applied with theatrical makeup. I looked directly at Chelsea. "Chelsea, you want to tell everyone who paid for that photo shoot? Or should I show them the credit card records?" Chelsea was on her feet now, her face flushed with anger. "You're lying! Those photos are real, and everyone here knows what kind of man you are." "What kind of man am I, Chelsea?" "You're a controlling, abusive. I'm a mechanical engineer who pays his taxes, coaches Little League on weekends, and hasn't gotten so much as a speeding ticket in 5 years. I gestured around the room. Half the people in this bar have known me for years. Do I seem like the kind of guy who beats women? Murmurs of no and not Dave rippled through the crowd. But you know what I am? I continued. I'm the kind of guy who documents everything, every conversation, every transaction, every lie. I pulled up another file on my phone. This is a recording of Brad Castellano threatening me last night, trying to extort me into dropping the criminal charges against Janet. Brad's voice filled the bar, arrogant and condescending, talking about Janet's documentation and suggesting they could work something out. When it finished, I looked around the room. So here's what's really happening. My wife has been having an affair with a wealthy man who convinced her she could take half of everything I own. They cooked up an elaborate scheme to frame my best friend for a crime, destroy my reputation with fake abuse allegations, and position Janet as a sympathetic victim in divorce court. I pointed at Chelsea. And they recruited Janet's friends to help spread lies and manipulate public opinion. Chelsea was backing toward the door now, her supporters looking uncertain. The only problem with their plan, I continued, is that they underestimated the quiet guy with the engineering degree. They thought I'd be too trusting, too passive, too stupid to fight back. I finished my beer and set the glass on the bar. They were wrong. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and increasingly desperate attempts by Janet's team to control the narrative. But their coordination was breaking down, and cracks were starting to show. It started with Derek. Wednesday morning, I found him waiting by my car again, but this time he looked different, less aggressive, more uncertain. "Patterson, we need to talk." "I'm listening." Derek glanced around nervously, then pulled out his phone. "Brad's been lying to me about everything." He showed me a series of text messages between him and Brad, starting from 2 weeks ago. Brad had been feeding Derek information about me, that I was violent, that I'd threatened Janet, that I was planning to disappear her if she tried to leave. "He told me Janet was in real danger," Derek said. "Said she needed protection while she gathered evidence to leave safely. Made me feel like I was helping save someone's life. And now? Now I find out the whole thing was fake. The bruises, the threats, all of it." Derek's jaw was tight with anger. "He played me, man. Used me like a puppet." I studied Derek's face, looking for signs of deception, but he seemed genuinely angry and embarrassed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't like being used. And because—" He hesitated. "Because Brad's planning something else, something worse." "What do you mean?" Derek showed me another text from Brad. "Phase 2 tonight. Make sure you're available around 10 p.m. This ends the problem permanently." A chill ran down my spine. "Derek, what's Phase 2? "I don't know exactly, but Brad's been asking weird questions about your schedule, your habits, whether you keep guns in the house, and he's been researching something called suicide by cop." The pieces clicked into place in my mind. If Janet was going to prison for false charges and the divorce was falling apart, Brad needed a new strategy, and the most permanent solution would be if I simply wasn't around to testify or claim my assets. "Derek, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to play along with Brad for one more day. Find out what Phase 2 involves, get details, get it recorded if you can." Derek looked uncertain. "I don't know, man. If something happens to you—" "Nothing's going to happen to me because I'll be ready for it, but I need evidence of what Brad's planning." After some persuasion, Derek agreed. We exchanged phone numbers, and I gave him a small digital recorder I kept in my car for work notes. That afternoon, Patricia called with more good news. "David, the forensic accountant found something interesting. Brad's been moving money around, setting up shell companies, preparing to hide assets. But here's the thing. Some of that money belongs to his other clients. He's embezzling? It looks like it, and if Janet knew about it, she could be charged as an accessory. How do we prove she knew? We already did. Remember that recording of Janet and Brad planning the frame job? She mentions the Cayman account and asks if the transfers went through. Your wife wasn't just planning to steal your money, David. She was planning to help Brad steal from his clients. This was bigger than I'd thought. Not just adultery and false charges, but major financial crimes, the kind that brought federal investigators and serious prison time. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Meeting with Brad at 8 p.m. We'll record everything. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I called Sam and filled him in, then contacted Detective Brennan and Patricia. By evening, I had backup plans for my backup plans. At 9:30 p.m., Derek called. "Dave, you need to hear this." His voice was shaky. "Did you get it recorded?" "Yeah, but man, this is bad. Really bad." Derek had met Brad at an upscale restaurant downtown, supposedly to discuss the next phase of their plan to protect Janet. But Brad's real agenda was much darker. The recording was chilling. Brad, speaking in the casual tone of someone ordering dinner, laid out a plan to make my elimination look like a justified police shooting. "Derek's going to call in a domestic violence situation," Brad explained on the recording. "Says he can hear screaming from David's house. Sounds like someone's in serious danger. When the cops arrive, they'll find David acting erratically, maybe waving something that could be a weapon." "What if he doesn't cooperate?" Derek asked on the recording. "That's where the drugs come in. Rohypnol in his beer makes people confused and aggressive. By the time the cops arrive, David won't know where he is or what's happening. In that state, it's easy to mistake a cell phone for a gun." My hands were shaking as I listened. They were planning to drug me, call the police with a fake emergency, and hope that a confused response would end with me being shot by responding officers. "There's more," Derek said. "After you're gone, Janet inherits everything as your widow. The criminal charges get dropped because the victim of her abuse is no longer around to testify. She and Brad disappear to the Cayman Islands with your money and whatever he's stolen from his clients." "Derek, where are you now?" "Parking lot outside Murphy's. Brad thinks I'm on board with the plan. He gave me the drugs and a burner phone to make the call." "Okay, listen carefully. I need you to bring me everything, the drugs, the phone, the recording device. Can you do that?" "Yeah, but Dave, what if Brad realizes I'm not going through with it? Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance." An hour later, Derek, Sam, Detective Brennan, and I were sitting in the detective's office, listening to the recording and examining the evidence Derek had brought. "This is attempted murder," Detective Brennan said grimly. "Conspiracy, drugging, filing false reports with intent to cause harm. Brad Castellano is looking at 20 to life." "What about Janet?" I asked. "Depends on how much she knew. But given her involvement in the financial crimes Patricia uncovered, she's looking at serious federal charges either way." Detective Brennan stood up. "Derek, you're going to wear a wire tomorrow. We're going to let Brad think his plan is moving forward, and then we're going to arrest him when he makes his move." "What about David?" Sam asked. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing's going wrong," Detective Brennan said firmly. "We'll have the house surrounded, and David will be safely out of the way. Brad Castellano picked the wrong target this time." As we left the police station, Derek pulled me aside. "Patterson, I'm sorry. About everything. I should have seen through Brad's lies from the beginning." "Derek, you did the right thing when it mattered. That's what counts." "Still, I feel like an idiot. All that stuff about protecting Janet, about you being dangerous, I wanted to believe I was helping someone. Brad's a professional manipulator. He fooled Janet for months, and she's not stupid. Don't beat yourself up about it." Derek nodded, then looked at me seriously. "What happens after tomorrow? I mean, assuming everything goes according to plan?" I thought about it. Janet would be in federal prison. Brad would be facing multiple life sentences. Chelsea and the others would slink away, pretending they'd never been involved. After tomorrow, I start over. New house, new life, new everything. Think you'll be able to trust people again? After all this? I looked at Sam, who'd stood by me despite being framed. At Derek, who'd risked his own safety to warn me about Brad's plan. At Detective Brennan, who'd taken my case seriously from the beginning. "Yeah," I said. "I think I will." Thursday evening, I sat in Detective Brennan's surveillance van 3 blocks from my house, watching multiple video feeds as Brad's plan unfolded exactly as he'd described it. Derek was playing his role perfectly. At 9:47 p.m., he called 911 from the burner phone Brad had given him, reporting screams and sounds of violence from my address. His voice shook with just the right amount of concern and fear. "I think someone's getting hurt really bad in there," he told the dispatcher. "It sounds like a man yelling and a woman screaming. I think I heard something break." 2 patrol cars were already positioned nearby, ready to respond. But instead of the confused, drugged target Brad expected, they'd find my house empty except for Detective Brennan's team. "There he is," Detective Brennan said, pointing to one of the monitors. Brad's white Tesla pulled up across the street from my house, parking in the shadows between 2 streetlights. He was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap, trying to look inconspicuous while he waited for the police response that would eliminate his problem permanently. "Arrogant piece of garbage," Sam muttered from beside me. "Actually thinks he's going to get away with murder." On the radio, we heard the patrol units acknowledge the domestic violence call. Brad would be expecting them to find me disoriented and aggressive from the drugs he'd given Derek to slip into my beer. Instead, they'd find a house full of federal agents and enough evidence to put Brad away forever. "All units, suspect vehicle is in position," Detective Brennan spoke into her radio. "Wait for my signal." Through the surveillance equipment, we watched Brad check his watch, then pull out his phone. He was probably calling Derek to confirm that I'd been drugged and was acting erratically. Derek answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Yeah? Is it done?" Brad's voice came through clearly on the wire Derek was wearing. "He drank the beer about 20 minutes ago, started acting weird, stumbling around, talking loud. That's when I called 911. "Perfect. The cops should be there any minute. Once they take care of our problem, you disappear. We never met, never talked, never knew each other." "What about my money?" "Your money?" Brad's voice turned cold. "Derek, you just helped commit murder. You think I'm going to leave a witness alive who can tie me to this?" There was a long pause. Then Derek, his voice carefully controlled. "What do you mean?" "I mean after tonight, you're a liability. And I don't keep liabilities around." "Brad, we had a deal. We had an arrangement. The arrangement is over." Through the video feed, we could see Brad reaching into his glove compartment. When his hand came back, it was holding a pistol. "All units. Suspect is armed," Detective Brennan spoke urgently into her radio. "Move in now." The next few minutes were chaos. Police cars converged on Brad's Tesla from 3 directions, spotlights flooding the street with harsh white light. Brad tried to start his car, but spike strips had been deployed behind him while he was focused on my house. Through the van's speakers, we heard him screaming into his phone, "Derek, what the hell is happening? There are cops everywhere." Derek's response was calm. "They're happening because you just threatened to harm me, Brad, and because every word of this conversation has been recorded." Brad's face, visible in the spotlights, went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, rage, and finally, defeat. He threw the phone down and raised his hands as officers surrounded his car. "Brad Castellano, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, drug trafficking, and about 6 other felonies. I'm going to enjoy reading to you," Detective Brennan announced over the loudspeaker. As they led Brad away in handcuffs, he looked directly at the surveillance van, somehow knowing I was inside watching. "This isn't over, Patterson," he screamed. "You think you've won, but Janet's going to take everything you have, everything." I stepped out of the van and walked over to where Brad was being loaded into a police car. He looked smaller now, less intimidating without his expensive suit and arrogant confidence. "Brad," I said quietly, "let me explain something to you. Janet's not taking anything because Janet's going to prison. The federal prosecutors are very interested in those Cayman Island accounts and your creative approach to client funds." His face went pale. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know that embezzling client money is a federal crime. I know that conspiracy to commit murder carries a life sentence. And I know that right now, Janet's sitting in a federal holding cell, probably wondering why the brilliant plan you sold her has turned into a complete disaster." Brad sagged against the police car. "She doesn't know anything about the client accounts." "Maybe not. But she knew about the plan to hurt me, didn't she?" Brad's silence was answer enough. As the police car drove away, Derek walked over to where Sam and I were standing. "Is it really over?" he asked. "The criminal part is over," I said. "Brad's going away forever, Janet's facing serious federal charges, and everyone who helped them is going to have to explain their actions to investigators." "What about the divorce?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a text from Patricia. "Federal prosecutors are seizing all marital assets as evidence in the embezzlement case. Divorce is on hold pending criminal proceedings. Janet's looking at 15-20 years minimum." Derek shook his head in amazement. 2 weeks ago, I thought Brad was some kind of financial genius, and you were a dangerous abuser. Now he's going to prison and you're... What? Free? Free, single, and about to be significantly wealthier once the federal government finishes sorting out which money was stolen and which was legitimately mine. Sam clapped me on the shoulder. "So what's the plan now, Dave? Sell the house? Move somewhere warm?" I looked back at my house, thinking about all the memories it contained. Most of them were tainted now, poisoned by the knowledge of what Janet had been planning. Yeah, I think it's time for a change of scenery. Maybe somewhere people don't know the whole story. "You going to miss this place?" I thought about it for a moment. "Sam, 3 days ago I thought my biggest problem was a broken TV and a wife who'd been framed by my best friend. Now I know my wife was planning to have me hurt so she could steal my money and run away with a con artist. And I'm standing here alive and free while the people who tried to destroy me are on their way to federal prison. No, I don't think I'm going to miss this place at all." Detective Brennan walked over to join us. "David, we'll need you to testify when this goes to trial, but that probably won't be for months. Brad's lawyer is already talking about a plea deal." "What kind of plea deal?" "Life without parole instead of a capital sentence. Apparently, your recording of him planning to harm you was very convincing." "And Janet?" "That depends on how cooperative she wants to be. If she testifies against Brad and provides information about the embezzled funds, she might get 15 years instead of 25. I nodded. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen, but it was justice. As we walked back to Sam's truck, Derek called after us. "Patterson, what you said earlier about trusting people again, did you mean it?" I stopped and looked back at him. Derek, who'd been manipulated and used, but who'd done the right thing when it mattered most. "Yeah, Derek, I meant it." "Good. Because I was thinking, after all this is over, after the trials and everything, maybe we could grab a beer sometime. You know, without anyone trying to poison it." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. "Derek, I'd like that." As Sam's truck pulled away from the scene, I looked back one last time at the house where my marriage had died and my real life had begun. Tomorrow, I'd start making plans for whatever came next. Tonight, I was just grateful to be alive.